missing your first tooth, learning to ride a bike.
It's like it's like showing that when you like grow up or like.
Yeah, it's like that next step. So, next thing you're going to do. So what's the next big rite of passage that you all face? I should have lots of hands. You've probably been talking about it all the time.
Middle school?
Middle school. You're going to move from being in an elementary school, you're going to middle school, you're going to change classes all the time. So that's kind of like your next rite of passage. And the writing that we're going to do is similar. We're going to kind of make a big leap and do some of the hardest writing you've done, and you're ready for it. You've done good writing all year. You've been smart. Yes, you have. I can't even believe you're shaking your head. You guys have done an exceptionally good job. So we're going to look at the kind of writing that sometimes people do when they get ready to go to college. Anybody have a brother or sister who's applying to colleges or apply to colleges? So when they're applying, they have to write an essay. And often what the college wants to know in that essay is like, who are you? What makes you different or special? Or why should I know you over everyone else? And that looking back on who you are is writing a memoir. And the hard thing about writing memoirs is they're not just one way. When we write an information book, you knew what you were doing. If you were writing a poem, you know what it looks like, you know what it should sound like. If you write a personal narrative, when we did that in the beginning, you knew what it looked like, you knew what it should sound like, you had seen it. But memoir, there's lots of things. Memoir can be a poem, it can be an essay, it can take more of a story form. So today we're going to look at some memoirs and try to figure out what's the big pieces we want to know about memoir so we can start to write them, that looking back on what we would choose to be important. So we're going to read a memoir that you know part of, that you looked at part of it in the beginning of the year. And some of you, I think, even read 11 last year in Mrs. Bigelow's class. Raise your hand if you read. So you remember that. So we're going to look at it as to notice the kind of writing that's going on, and when does it seem like it changes, the way it changes. So if you want to make notes about things you notice about this, you could just make them in your writer's notebook. If you want to jot down places where either the tone changes, or you notice it feels different, or the language changes. And if not, let's just follow along while I read. So, 11. What they don't understand about birthdays, and what they never tell you, is that when you're 11, you're also 10, and 9, and 8, and 7, and 6, and 5, and 4, and 3, and 2, and 1. And when you wake up on your 11th birthday, you expect to feel 11, but you don't. You open your eyes and everything's just like yesterday, only it's today. And you don't feel 11 at all. You feel like you're still 10. And you are underneath that year that makes you 11. Like some days you might say something stupid, and that's part of you that's still 10. Or maybe some days you might need to sit on your mom's lap because you're scared, and that's the part of you that's 5. And maybe one day when you're all grown up, maybe you will need to cry like if you're 3. And that's okay. That's when I tell Mama when she's sad and needs to cry. Maybe she's feeling 3. Because the way you grow old is kind of like an onion, or like the rings inside a tree trunk, or like my little wooden dolls that fit one inside the other, each year inside the next one. That's how being 11 years old is. You don't feel 11, not right away. It takes a few days, weeks even, sometimes even months before you say 11 when they ask you. And you don't feel smart 11, not until you're almost 12. That's the way it is. Only today, I wish I didn't have only 11 years rattling inside me like pennies in a tin Band-Aid box. Today, I wish I was 102 instead of 11. Because if I was 102, I'd have known what to say when Mrs. Price put the red sweater on my desk. I would have known how to tell her that it wasn't mine instead of just sitting there with that look on my face and nothing coming out of my mouth. Do you remember the next part that's going to happen? Someone tell us what you remember about the next part. It's not hers, but what happens? What's the thing that kind of makes us remember it?
Well, she really describes the moment, like she really zooms in.
She zooms in really close and
It describes how she really hates that person. I can't remember her name, and she's like, I think it's hers. And she's like, yeah. And she's just really annoyed and mad and sad and angry and frustrated and everything.
And when we hear that, when we read that part, could you feel what she was feeling?
Yeah.
Yes, she did it. Does that feel different than the part we read so far?
Yes.
So, what did this beginning part feel like? When you were listening to that beginning part, what were you thinking? What did it sound like?
It felt more like more of a recalling instead of like in the moment.
So she's not really in a moment, right?
Right.
It feels bigger than in a moment. What else?
Well, she was really just telling us how once you're 11, you can feel many different ways in both in the next part, because I've heard this before.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually more of like a story. It's like in a moment.
Right, that's exactly what happens. This is like this telling you what she's thinking about being 11. It's not a story, it's kind of her thoughts about being that age. And then we stop there and she zooms into this story. And this beginning part feels almost like an essay. We don't have an exact thesis statement, but look at the beginning. Look at how she starts. What they don't understand about birthdays and what they never tell you is that when you're 11, you're also 10, 9, and 8, and 7, and 6, and 5, and 4, and 3, and 2, and 1. That she's going to talk about that feeling that she has. So there's not a set thesis statement, but she's giving us an opinion about something. Do we know her opinion?
Yeah.
Do we know the reason she has about thinking about it? So she starts out almost like an essay and moves into a story. And so we're going to spend some time today. Often writers, before they start writing something, they take time to get to know it well. And so we have a whole list over here. There's piles of memoirs. And your job for the next 20 minutes is to choose different memoirs, read them, and you're gonna, you can keep them. We have enough for them each have. So you can make notes about things you notice. You can make notes about things that are happening. And your big goal is to figure out, what do you think from reading these is important about memoir? Mm-hmm.
Well, what I was going to say about the beginning of the story is that it kind of feels like a conversation.
Like she's talking to you?
Yeah, because it's more like a moment.
So one of the things we want to notice, do any of the other memoirs you read today have that same kind of feeling? Do they start the same way, or do they start differently?
They could start with the moment and then go into telling about it.
So you're thinking there might be some that will almost start like with the sweater story and then go into something, so you're going to want to notice that. Or do they start totally different and don't have either of those pieces? Okay? So there's, it looks like about 6 memoirs, and your goal over the next 20 minutes is to at least read 1, but hopefully 2 or 3. Got it? So why don't we go by rows? Why doesn't this row go ahead and pick